pretty
How
slow.
about we hand over the stick to our guest again, calling in from New Zealand. Thank you so much for making the time for joining us, Jeff. Love the Kiwis and excited for all things dataviz. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Excellent. I'm just going to start a timer so I can keep a track on how long I blab on for. So just give me a second. Start.
Okay.
Yep. Excellent. Let me share my screen. First of all, I'll park this over there. Hey folks, I'm Jeff, live in New Zealand. We've got a population of about 8. All of us are good at Power BI. Some of us better than others. We've got Phil Seamark here, who's on the Power BI team. Lives not far from where I am. We've got Daniel Marsh Patrick down in Christchurch, inventor of Deneb that uses Vega Lite, which we'll be talking a little bit about today down in Christchurch. We've got a whole bunch of MVPs here. We like to say we punch above our weight, but boy, do we punch above our weight. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually pop a link into the chat, which is actually my presentation. I put it in earlier, but if you've just got here, hopefully this will work for you. So this whole presentation on Power BI is actually done in Power BI because it's kind of a cool presentation software. And I may struggle a little bit because there's a lot of bookmarks. Hopefully hopefully I've got them all happening. Funny, why is already I'm struggling? Just give me a second. Right, now it's working. Excellent. Okay, so I'm just a dude on the other side of the world who likes playing around with Power BI. Got a long interest in datavis and come from an Excel background. Yay, Excel, just like Oz and probably most of us. Kind of cut my teeth on datavis with John Poutier's website for Poutier Technical Services. Fantastic learnings there. And John really got me into a lot of other kind of datavis stuff. And I'm not an early adopter of Power BI. I'm really quite a late adopter. That's because I thought it really sucked when it came out, and it did. I mean, it was pretty terrible, you know.
Agreed.
But partly it was also that I was really heavily invested in VBA as well, and I kind of thought, oh, who needs this Power Query crap? You know, it's like, why would I want to use that when I've got 15 years of VBA development behind my belt? And then one day I had to do something. I think it was extract a whole lot of files from a folder with nested folders, and I didn't have any off the shelf VBA. And I went, oh, this is going to take me ages to write some routines for this. I'll just have a play with this Power Query thing. And 5 minutes later, it was done, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I kind of went, all right, I'm going to leave VBA behind and start learning Power Query, and that's what got me into Power BI. And so now I'm a convert, and I hardly spend any time in Excel, not because it's not a great product, but just because the money seems to be in Power BI these days. And so today what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover an actual kind of a build of a dashboard I did for a client and talk about some of the design thinking along the way, and maybe show some options that you may or may not have seen before in Power BI. And we're going to go hard and fast, but everything you see, all the links will be available via that published to web. Sorry, I'm struggling for words. Published to web presentation I sent through. Cool. And if you want to find me, easiest place is on Twitter. Let's get started. So this is my friend Jordan. I've known Jordan for several years. He got a job as the executive director of the NZ US Council, and he needed to really show what was happening between the relationship between New Zealand and the US for his stakeholders. And he particularly needed to show a comparison to other markets like China and Australia, because in New Zealand, China is actually our largest trading partner, and the US is our third largest after Australia. And China was always getting all the oxygen in the press whenever there was any kind of trade-related kind of stuff. And he wanted to kind of make the point that the US-New Zealand relationship is deeper than the China one because we do a lot more creative stuff in it. It's a lot less about goods and a lot more about services. And he was struggling to actually find the data to do this. He So I take it everybody can see the dashboard, right? Everybody can see my slides. Yes, I think you can. He had access to an existing dashboard that our government, our stats department built, NZ-US trade dashboard, but he'd really struggled to get what he needed out of it. And this is just a screenshot of it here. It's built in Shiny. And I'm actually just going to see if it lets me click on this link to get to it. Pull it over. And I just want to start talking about why he struggled with this one before I talk about the build that I did to take the data from this and to build something new. So it's not unattractive. It's, you know, crisp, clean, built in Shiny, and it's got some stuff there about our trade situation. But there's a couple of points to note. Straight off the bat, it doesn't fit on one screen. And that's always a pet peeve of mine. If you have to scroll down to the bottom to look at something, you can't see what's at the top. If you're at the top, you can't see what's down at the bottom. At the same time, you'll notice that this header portion at the top here, it takes up like 20% of the screen, and it's only got very few bits of information on it, so it's just wasted space. It's kind of cool though. You've got a slicer here where you can go and look for your country. One of the things that I hate about this, that I often see in slicers, is it's in alphabetical order, and it can be a real pain because it doesn't tell you anything about, well, which countries are the most important. Sure as heck isn't Antarctica when it comes to our trade, or Albania or Afghanistan. It would be much better if that slicer was perhaps served up as a, maybe in terms of descending order of trade value or something or other. And so you don't get any idea of how important each country is, and it's just a bit of a pain to go and search for things. You'll see at the bottom here, in the middle here, there's a smart narrative, which is pretty cool. So it tells us, you know, in June 2020 we exported and imported this much, and there's a trade balance of that. And that's kind of cool, actually, because as you were to click further into this, let me just expand out here. If we were to actually go and look at particular goods, that smart narrative actually starts talking about the nature of the goods relationship, or let's look at services. Services is an example. So it talks about services. Let's go look at travel down here. So it's kind of cool. It's pretty smart, actually. So it does give you quite a bit of information. But the other problem he had with this dashboard is that the data structure is really weird. And you can kind of see this if I go and have a look at the subcategories of travel. We've got business travel, personal travel, education, health, and other. And you may notice that these numbers here, these are the Stats New Zealand classifications. We've got A12041, A12042, we've got A120421, 422, 423. So these three things are kind of subsets of this top one. And what it means is, you know, you might want to look at personal travel. You might think, well, actually, I'm also interested in education travel. What it does is, as you add these things in here, it actually just lumps them together and plots them in the graph as a total. And this is particularly bad in this particular case because personal travel is actually made up of education, health, and other personal travel. So we're just double counting. So it's a little hard to see what's going on. So there's some double counting there. There's selecting these different categories is a bit of a pain. We can't actually compare categories with each other very easily. There's the ability here, you can see this, there's the ability to change the time basis from quarterly to yearly. This data actually comes out quarterly, but they had the foresight to think, well, sometimes people might want to look at it on an annual basis. But kind of confusingly, we've got year ended March, June, September, and December. That's because the data comes out 4 times a year, or just whichever one you pick is going to be the endpoint for that aggregation. That doesn't really make sense to have 4. Like, for instance, which one is the most up-to-date data? Is it March? Is it June? Well, we're in October now, so you'd probably think, yeah, it's probably going to be September. But if I actually click on September, see the years only go up to 2021. If I click on June, the data goes up to 2022. The reason being is there's a bit of a lag with the publication of this data. So the latest data only goes to June, but this doesn't tell you which one to pick. We don't need 4 options. We really just need one. We've got the ability to look at our top 5 or 10 countries or categories if we want. So we can click this thing to show the top 10 countries in the breakdown. So we get some kind of idea of imports versus exports. But there's no cross-filtering ability in this. So if I click on Australia here, I don't think it will filter the graph at the top, if I can even get to it. Let me try this. Yeah, I can't even get to it. So it's not overly interactive. We can't cross-filter. We can't click on here to filter the graph above to see what's going on really, really quickly. And you'll also notice that if I click on this help finding products, this gives an idea of just how problematic some of these categories that users are. It says here, hey, we've got some commodity groups that aren't always obvious. For instance, eggs can be found in the dairy category. Honey can be found in the dairy category. Coal can be found in mineral fuels and oils. So it can be a little hard to even find things or to look for insights. So it didn't answer his question. In fact, Jordan was finding that in trying to understand the different categories of trade within the US or comparing to China, he was actually printing out different graphs of these, cutting them out and putting them on his kitchen table, just so he could kind of get an overview of how these trends differed. Power BI. So it didn't work for him. I actually rebuilt that in Power BI just to see if I could do it, and I could. It's kind of cool. It's the same data. So the cool thing about this dashboard is it does let you export the data, but it's just not very good at answering questions requiring comparison. So I've got some examples here. How did COVID affect travel? Which countries were most impacted? What kinds of travel? What goods and services had the most growth over the last 12 months? How does the nature of our trade relationship differ from that with China? And what about the trade balance, the difference between imports and exports? Has there been any interesting changes in the trade balance? It's a little hard to see. And I saw this cool paper the other day from a guy, quoted by a guy, Enrico Bertini. He's quoting from another paper that really talks about the necessity for datavis to answer questions. If it doesn't answer questions, it's not very good. And in fact, this paper actually says, hey, writing some questions down and asking potential readers to answer them is a really, really good way of doing a design critique if you don't have someone else that can do a peer review for you. I thought that was really, really cool to point out. So maybe Stats New Zealand could have done a better job of thinking about what kinds of questions people might want to answer with their dashboard and then provide them to users to see how they get on. And this is actually Enrico Bertini, who I got that quote from. He's got another great quote of his own here. If you don't have the right question, then it really doesn't matter what visuals you use. And there's another guy that he does a podcast with. These two guys have a podcast together called Data Stories. It's excellent. Highly recommend it. Moritz Stefaner, he's got this fantastic article called Datavis in the Industry that kind of talks about some of the issues that we're grappling with in this particular dashboard, but probably across our industry. And he says, most data displays I find in corporate contexts fall into two major categories. The first is number decoration. So it's just taking a number, drawing a circle around it and calling it insightful. As he says here, it's like you're interested in the forest, but you only get a beautiful little stick. And the second is the data explorer. Let me just go down here and see whether this works. Yes, it does. Great. And I love this quote from him. Generic, technology-driven, unfocused, inhumane drop-down orgies where insights go to die. Obviously, that is not good. That's a great quote.
Wow.
I can't see who said wow.
That's going to be on my tombstone. I just figured out what's on my tombstone.
Dude, Gregory had his last drop down orgy or something. So
Headless BI.
Moritz says, hey, we need some kind of middle ground where we can actually see what's going on and investigate anything that's interesting. Partly the reason that we're so bad at this as an industry, not just Power BI, but datavis in general, is because there's lots and lots of books on datavis, but very few on dashboard design. Here's one of them, and this is a bit of a pun because it's by Stephen Few. And his book is kind of it's from a less interactive time. It's quite prescriptive. So he says, you know, he even tells us what a dashboard is, a visual display of the most important information, single screen, monitored at a glance. So pretty prescriptive. It was pretty groundbreaking for its time. There wasn't anything else out before on dashboard design before it came, as far as I'm aware. There's a new book which is from a much less prescriptive time and a more interactive time because technology has moved on in the interim. And I highly recommend both of these books. I think they're both good. But I really love the Big Book of Dashboards, even though it's mostly Tableau and other software. It was printed before Power BI was really a thing. We let us go, a dashboard is a visual display of data used to monitor conditions and or facilitate understanding. So it's really not getting too tied up in the definition. What I like about this book is it reminds me of back when I had hair, or more hair. You know, you go to the hairdresser, you'd sit down in the waiting room, and there'd be a book that you'd thumb through, and you'd look at different haircuts, and you go, oh yes, I'll have the Bob Geldof, or I don't know, somebody. And this book is the same. It kind of really allows you to see ways of presenting your data. So highly recommend this as being worth of a read. At the same time, the technology's changed quite a bit, and we've got a lot more options for interactivity, and possibly we tend to overuse them or over rely on them. So I pulled this quote out of this other book from Andy Kirk that says, you know, the brilliance of it is when interactivity introduces new means of engaging with data that simply could not be achieved in other ways. And I really like that first part of the quote. Don't underestimate how effective a well-conceived and executed static presentation of data can be. In other words, when we're designing dashboards, it's cool that we can let people click things, but it's cool if we can serve up a lot of information without them even having to touch the mouse. So this is just back to the stats dashboard again. So this is what we had. And there's actually an information problem here. We've got 255 countries. We've got, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 categories. How the heck do you go about presenting this so that people can see beyond the top 10? It's a hard challenge. One way you may be tempted to do it for starters is you might think, okay, great, a tree map would be good for that because tree maps are space efficient. You can put a lot of information into a very small space. If we break it down by category and by country, then great, we could like click on, for instance, China, and we could see where China's imports and exports are. In fact, let me just make this into exports for a second, just for the heck of it. Great. What are our major exports to China? What are our major exports to the US, or vice versa? We could go, who's buying our vegetable products? And then we get it. But there's some problems with this visualization, and that you really can't see what's going on over time. You can't even see what these smaller groups are without hovering over them. So we're back to having to over rely on interactivity just to see what's going on. So, and we've still got a lot of slices across the top in the event that we want to drill down and see, you know, well, what does goods look like? What does services look like? So it's still a bit of a drop down orgy in some ways, but inhumane. And if you think about it, oops, sorry, before we go there, tree maps are actually designed for hierarchical data anyway. So this is the category tree map I had on the first page with just one field. I bring up the fields list. No, sorry, visualizations list. You know, we've just got category in here. This one here, we've got category and country. This is actually how they're designed to be. Tree maps aren't supposed to have a different color for every panel. They're supposed to be color coded like this so you can see within a particular category. So we can see, hey, where are all these live animals going? Where are all these foodstuffs going? But even this isn't good, especially in this particular case. We've actually got more points than the tree map will display because of the combination of categories and countries. And so it's actually causing incorrect display. And you can kind of see that if you compare the sizes of some of these categories. If this displayed correctly, these squares would be the same color between the left and the right, but we can see something's going on. We can see we've got wood items here, but it looks a lot bigger over here. And that's just because some other data has been left out elsewhere in the tree map, and it's causing an incorrect display. It's not actually displaying all of the data. I don't mean to be overly down on tree maps. There is a great article that I've linked to that you can click in your own time to go and look, or two articles, in fact, to go and have a look at some examples for tree maps. In fact, there was a really cool blog the other day from this guy. I think it's Andre is his name, showing how you can make more meaningful tree maps in Power BI by actually, instead of just having arbitrary colors, maybe you could color code them to show a percentage change over time. But still not really recommended in my book. And if you think about it, tree maps are really just square pie charts. So if you wouldn't do this in a pie chart, and hopefully you wouldn't, then really you probably shouldn't do this in a tree map either. A tree map is just a space-efficient pie chart. I'm not down on pie charts, by the way. There is some good links here where you can find some more information about them, including this really cool video from this visualization expert, Robert Corsaro, who actually talks about how we actually interpret them. People used to think it was to do with the angle, but it's not. I think it's actually to do with the arc. It's worth watching. It's actually very humorous as well. Oops, that is not doing what I thought it would do. Let me maybe I just need to clear this. Oh, that's unfortunate. Sorry, folks. I know why. The demo gods. There we go. If you're going to serve up a pie chart, it's a really good idea to see if you can tame it in some particular way. And I've done that here by just using color to highlight a particular slice. Here I'm looking at the others versus 5 other categories. This uses some pretty complex DAX code from the SQL BI guys that just allows you to dynamically gather up your top N and then put everything else into an others bucket. And we can actually see this if I change this how many series down to, I don't know, 3, for instance. We will see that dynamically it's going to say, here's your 3 slices and here's everything else. So don't be afraid of the pie chart, but we really want something on the right-hand side versus the left. The problem with pie charts and tree maps, of course, is they don't show us the data over time. And if we want to show data over time, especially with such a large amount of data like this, we've got some issues. First of all, maybe we could try a stack column chart. We would have to filter it on the top 10 countries or so in this particular case to even make this vaguely understandable, but it's still a bit of a mess. What I mean by that is if I actually take off this filter just for a second and make it show all countries, get some really, really weird effects. Again, there's so much data in here that not everything's showing. We can't even necessarily see the major countries in here. I'm pretty sure the legend doesn't go all the way to U for the United States. It probably stops somewhere. Oh no, it does go all the way. That's good to know. But it's a bit of a mess. As a stack by bar chart, in my opinion, is often a cry for help. There are some great use cases. Again, I've got some articles in here that I recommend you check out about when they may be useful, but I'd say that these are the exceptions, and that if your charts look like the ones below, you've got to try something else. Now, partly the reason is it's really the color assignment by Power BI is kind of arbitrary, so we've got some really, really awful colors here. It's really, really hard to see what's going on. Even if the colors were better, you can only really see the trends in the bottom one that shares a common baseline. So it's not great. Okay, great. Well, we'll just turn it into a line chart then. Problem solved. But then you've got the problem of something that looks a bit like spaghetti. So it's better, we can see what's going on. We can put the series labels on the right-hand side automatically, so we can do away with the legend, but it gets a bit messy down the bottom here. And another problem with Power BI is if you've got, say, 10 countries like this, or if you've got more than one country or one item in a line chart, Power BI, the tooltips are actually in the wrong order. They actually serve up the tooltip in alphabetical order. And you can see this here where it says, hey, we've got Australia at the top, then China, then Germany. But if you actually look at the data, we've got China, Australia, United States, Japan, Korea, and Germany. So it's really, really hard for users to actually match these data points up with what's in the chart. By the way, it wasn't until recently that I realized you could actually style these things. So we've got the default tooltip here, but with modern tooltips, it looks a little bit better. You can actually make them white, make them semi-transparent, a few things like that. It's still not great. We don't have to accept these tooltips, by the way. We can whip up our own. This is the default tooltip. Again, this is out of order. We can see that we've got Australia and then Canada and China at the front. It's hard to see. Over here, I have built my own with the report page tooltip. And this one actually reflects the order of the series being shown on the chart. So it's a lot more easy for people to move their eyes back and forth. I make up a heck of a lot of report page tooltips because I just don't like what Power BI does natively. The other reason I like this particular tooltip is the native ones have these like little circles. They're kind of really mingy. I don't know whether mingy is a US term, but they're really stingy. There you go. Stingy little circles that really don't give you much of a swathe of color. Whereas over here, I'm using squares that just give you a little bit more, I don't know, surface area or area so that you can make comparisons between things. But on the last slide, we're still looking at just the top 10. Well, what if we make it dynamic? So we could certainly do that. So we could put in a little bit of DAX here, and I'm not going to explain any DAX in this presentation, but you will find there's a lot of DAX in it that's presented, so you can see how this kind of stuff works. But hey, we can actually deal with a spaghetti problem by saying, okay, well, what if we just want people to look at, I don't know, the top 5 to see what's going on, or maybe we'll let them then see the next 5, so they can progressively drill in without everything being a giant jumble. And, you know, that's pretty handy, but you're still looking at it piecemeal. It's still a little bit hard to see what's going on, but still a pretty nifty trick. Get my slider to work. Or you could do this. You could go, okay, well, why don't we actually just ask the user how many series they want to see and automatically roll everything up into the others category like we did with the pie chart. So this is another example. So I can change this to 5. Great, we've got the top 5 countries, the top 5 goods descriptions, and we've got an automatic generation of the others. Again, this is just slightly amended code from SQL BI guys. So, you know, that's worth consideration. But really, this is probably something that I'd be more inclined to do. This is quite a bit of work. I wish Power BI did this natively, but this is the old tried and true method of, hey, having a selector, make all the lines gray and just highlight the one of interest so they can see what's going on. And it's particularly handy in the case here where you've got data labels that overlap and so one gets suppressed. So we can actually see by clicking down here, we can see that, it's Singapore. Or over here, it's, you know, we can see what's going on in these different categories. We could make this top 20 if we want. There's some pretty cool DAX behind here. If you look in the presentation, you'll see that there's, I make up a new table. I do some measures to populate the visual, and then I have a visual level filter on the slicer as well. Again, it's beyond the scope of this presentation to talk about it, but the information's all there. What I quite like about this too is if we put, say, make this top 10, and I was to pick one quite far down the batting order, like Malaysia or, I don't know, not wood, what have we got? Chemical industrial stuff. If you change this back to top 5, it still actually retains those existing selections. I quite like how Power BI slices do that. So we've still got Malaysia there, even though it's not in the top 5. As soon as we click off, we lose Malaysia, which is cool. So that's not bad. We're getting to something where it's a lot more easier to make these comparisons. But really, my money is on small multiples for the win. So small multiples is just a panel chart that splits these things out into a different dimension. And it just avoids that spaghetti hell. And again, here I'm using this option to show a dynamic number of items, and we can roll everything up into an others category. So we could change this to, say, 6. I would have to go in and amend, in fact, let's make that 5. I would have to go and amend the settings of the small multiple panel to say, well, we don't need this last 3 rows, which we could do very quickly just for a laugh. Visualizations, somewhere under here, small multiples. So we can say we only want 2
Jeff,
rows.
at some point, would love to see the bookmarks too. It's what craziness you had to go through with all your bookmarks.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, a lot
Good
of
call out,
craziness.
Christine.
Look at that.
Oh my
but
God.
a lot of these are actually report navigation bookmarks, so they're not proper bookmarks. They just, hey, give me the next page. So what I mean by that is if I click on this and we go on action, it's page navigation. You can actually tell it which particular destination you want to go to next. So they're not bookmarks proper. It's the page navigation type of bookmark. Hope that's clear. So cool. You know, we can. I'll just let me change this back again. Let me just hit the undo button to get those 9 things back. So you know, we can show the top end. We can give the user the option to show all, and then put a scroll bar in. So now we've got everything. So again, small multiples is just a fantastic way to see this information, but they take up quite a bit of space. The other good thing about small multiples is you can show multiple series in them. So if I just go back once more, here we've got just total trade. But in this next one, I break it down to imports and exports. And you couldn't do that all in one panel. You couldn't have imports of China, exports from China, imports of Australia, exports of Australia, all in one non-small multiple chart. So they're really, really brilliant for this. But of course, if I just hit that one again, the other thing I forgot to mention is, of course, we can cross-filter these things. So we can click on, and this is something I didn't know until recently, but if you click on a point, normally it just filters the other thing by that point. But if you click on the title of a small multiple, it actually selects every point. I did not know that until, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. So we can filter on Australia, for instance, and we can see what's going on. We can, trick is unfiltering. It's really hard. They've made it quite hard to unfilter. We can filter on travel, and we can see the dive that our travel industry took because of COVID. Already done that one. Or we can go, actually, we don't have space for this other graph. We're going to put some other stuff here. So we could use drill through, for instance. So we've got United States here. We could set up a drill through page. Oops, it didn't work. Let me just try that again. Drill through. And we could drill through to look at a view of categories. So we're looking from the United States. We're going, okay, great. Oh, did not work. That's because I've got something selected in the other visual. Apologies for that. Not sure what's happened there. Let me just try that one more time. It's because I'm drilling through on a particular point, and I think I actually need to drill through on the whole thing. Can't get it to work. Demo gods. But really,
the demo gods, they always strike.
Even down here.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. But why bother with drill through when you can just pop up the thing straight off the bat? So this is what I'm doing here. So, you know, we could let people drill through, but that's a click. And drill through is, let's face it, it's unintuitive in Power BI. But just, you know, we can just actually hover over this and have everything come up. This trick, this requires 2 calendar tables in this particular instance because we've got a time series. And if normally in drill through, if I hover over 2018, when it does the not drill through the report page pop-up tooltip, it's going to pass 2018 as a filter, and it would normally filter everything down to just the point 2018. To get around that, you can see I've actually used 2 different calendar tables here. I've got calendar 1 on this particular visual, calendar 2 on the report page tooltip, and as it says in the explanation here, which you can peruse at your leisure, I use remove filters to just say, hey, when you do this pass through, forget about passing through the point that you're on. I don't want to collapse the calling visual to that. That'll become a bit more apparent in a future slide. But it's just that, you know, it's just much easier to allow people just to hover and see stuff without them having to click. One of the things I forgot to mention is the problem with report page tooltips is you lose any information about the point that you're at, like the data point that you're at. So you often have to, oops, wrong button, that again. So good with some of this technology, I tell you. Here we go, that's better. When I do drill through, report page tooltips, I often add this extra information up here so they know what point they're at and they know what the existing figures were at that particular point, because otherwise you lose it when you do this. But we could go one further and even collapse that information down into a much smaller space and just launch small multiples from here. So we already know that the beauty with a spaghetti chart is that it's quite compact. The downside of the spaghetti chart is that it can be a little bit hard to bust the lines apart. But why don't we just do a pop-up small multiple from a spaghetti chart so we get the best of both worlds? Now down here, I actually show what happens if you don't use 2 calendar tables. If you, in this particular thing, this calling visual and the report page tooltip share the same calendar. If I hover over 2018, it goes, oh great, I'll go and get this report page tooltip and I'll filter it to 2018. And that's completely useless. So that's the beauty of using this 2 calendar option and using remove filters to get rid of the filter on the first calendar. One of my other favorite tricks is to stand up a matrix on the side of small multiples so that people can do an easy drill through. So we could have a slicer up here, for instance, on category, but slicers, they're just kind of tedious. If we actually use a table as a slicer, then people can just click on here and, you know, obviously automatically filter the small multiple right off the bat. Plus we get some more information on the right-hand side here about the sizes of exports versus imports for the last year. So that's another kind of favorite trick. I did this presentation before we had fields parameters. So using bookmarks, I also put the ability to switch these things around. So now we've got countries here and category here. So we could filter on, I don't know, the US again, and see where our major categories are. Or if I click on country, it's going to swap them around. It's going to put country on the main visual to the left and category on the right. With fields parameters, you could do this a lot more easier now. But we've still got problems with the way that Power BI operates. And this is something that really kills me. Number formatting in Power BI is just god-awful, especially in a matrix or a table. So here we've got, it gives you the full number, 31 billion. But these numbers are so large, they take up a lot of space. I don't think there's an option to in the matrix to use auto format. There is an auto format option for other visuals like the small multiple, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense. So for instance, if I just deselect to get services here for a second, we'll see that every number adopts the format of the largest number. So we've got some big numbers at the top, billions. But down here we've got 0.1 billion and 0.0 billion. Well, is that nothing? No, it's not. Or what does a user may be going, well, what is 0.1 billion? Do they know that a billion is, what is it, 1,000 million? I think it depends on who you ask. So one of the things I've done with this particular dashboard is I've written a cool calculation group that will fix this by applying intelligent automatic formatting to every number. It takes a bit of time because it's labor intensive, but if I click on intelligent here, we'll see that for starters, all these things now are shown as either billions or millions, and it takes up a lot less space. And we can see down here, hey, it wasn't 0 billion, it was 12.6 million. So we've got billions up here and we've got millions down there. Again, if I switch back to the native, you'll see just what a massive improvement it is from having 0.0, big long columns of numbers, to intelligent formatting. And this is actually done via a calculation group. You can see the kind of crazy code that I used to do this here. The SQL BI guys have something similar on their website, although theirs probably won't, well, theirs doesn't handle negative numbers. My one does. That's kind of cool, but a little bit processor intensive. Cool. So we've looked at a chart like this. Wouldn't it be cool if we could just go ahead and fill the bits in between, so we can directly call out something that's of interest here, which is in this particular case the trade balance, which is the difference between imports and exports. It was always impossible to do this natively until they introduced error bars. So this is actually done with error bars, and it's not perfect, but it's probably good enough. And by not perfect, if I just change to services here, and let's see, yeah, there's an example. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. By not perfect, you can probably see there's a sliver of blue above the line here. It's not bad in this particular case, but sometimes it can look quite bad. You cannot coerce error bars to do this perfectly, but this is not bad. It would probably be more apparent if I just change this. Actually, I won't change it. Trust me, it's probably good enough for your circumstances. The trouble with it, though, is that the label placement is a bit crappy. So on the left-hand side, I've got the same thing from the last slide, and you'll see that Power BI is not very intelligent about how it places labels. On the right-hand side, I've gone all out and written some code that automatically puts the labels either above or below, depending on whether the point is higher or lower than the other point. And so it's a lot tidier. It's also a bit of a mess. It's quite resource intensive. Again, if I just click on this for a second, you will see, if I open the visualizations pane, there's a whole bunch of different series to do this. There's a dummy series that does this line across the bottom. I have to do 4 different measures just so it can work out, hey, am I the first point or am I the last point? Am I above the other series or am I below the other series? If I'm above the other series, great, put the label above. If I'm below the other series, put the label below. So you can do some pretty kind of cool stuff, but it's not easy. And it's pretty resource intensive. Or you can use Deneb. Now, I'm new to Deneb, and a lot of people on the call may be as well. Deneb is magic in a custom visual done by a guy in Christchurch, which is a city to the south of me, called Daniel Marsh-Patrick. So Deneb allows you to use a language called VegaLite or Vega to create visualizations that you couldn't even dream of with the native visuals. It's a little complex. Let me actually just click on this to show you the spec behind this one. So this is a visual, it's a Deneb visual. Come on, Power BI, you can do it. Can't do it. Let's try this again. Trying to, oh, there we go. I've selected this thing. We'll see that it's using this visual here, Deneb. Deneb just has a values area where you drag in a lot of different fields, and then you tell the visual via writing some JSON code what you want done with them. And it's all done via this built-in editor. So if I click here and go edit, we will see a preview of the visual, a bunch of JSON where we specify what needs to happen, and Bob's your auntie. So it's not for the faint of heart, though. So I didn't do this myself. This was actually very kindly done for me by this gentleman here, Tay. I think the proper pronunciation is Tays. I can't quite recall. And he did it based on a script that was put together by the Deneb creator Daniel Marsh-Patrick. There's some absolutely amazing libraries of Deneb out there, examples of Deneb from a couple of people. So I would suggest you check out these links to see what people are doing with this. This is just an example. This isn't perfect yet. I've got to get more smart about label placement. There is a issue at the moment with the spec here. I've got a bit of blue down here that I really don't expect to be there. It's below the line, but you can see that it's going to work. It's pretty cool. Deneb is the best thing to happen in Power BI for years, and it's got nothing to do with Microsoft. But all the stuff I've shown you takes an awful lot of time. You can probably, your average Power BI user can probably do something simple like this, but doing something on the right-hand side, using Deneb or error bars is going to be completely beyond people, unless you buy a custom visual that's fit for purpose. And in this particular case, I use Zebra BI custom visuals to do this. So this is like Deneb+++. It's easy to use. It just works magically. It's got awesome label placement. You get some additional things like these up and down arrows, which you can configure to show the difference from this point or difference from the second point, so on and so forth. It's got built-in others capability. So I didn't use DAX to do this. It just does this out of the box. And even more beautiful is we can actually change this. So if we want to see more things, I want to see the top 12, for instance, we can do it. It's a stunning piece of work. It's a commercial product, so you do have to buy a subscription to it. It can get somewhat pricey if you've got large, I don't know, user bases, but actually it's worth every cent, because people complain about the price of custom visuals, but man, they're a lot cheaper than having somebody like me spend months working out how to do this at a consulting rate. So I think they are highly cost effective. They're particularly cost effective in the case of this dashboard, because they have a great licensing published to web, where
watch this.
Sorry, somebody's not on.
Sorry, I muted him. Got you.
Yeah. It's really cool. If you're publishing all your dashboards to web, you only need to buy 5 licenses, and it's really cheap chips for that particular purpose. That was the Deneb graph or chart. They also have a Deneb table, which is absolutely amazing as well. And I just wanted to showcase some of the differences between these things. So here we've got a Power BI matrix, a Power BI table, and a Zebra BI table. Straight away, you'll see that the Zebra BI table has got some lovely colors in it. This is called an integrated variance chart. So not only does it show you what the value is at the moment, but it's also showing you the value since a previous point. So we're getting to see quite a bit of information straight off the bat that we don't get to see with the native ones. And the native ones, you can also see that I put some data bars in all these particular things, and this will highlight some problems with the matrix in the table. The matrix, one of the problems is you can't sort by export or import. You can only sort by the total. So I can click here all I want. It's not going to filter these. There's no option to filter by exports or imports here. In a Power BI, in a standard table, you can. So we can sort by exports, or we can sort by imports, because we've got 2 different fields in our visual. But because we've got 2 different fields, these bars aren't scaled relative to each other. So we've got a bar here that's about the same length as this one, but this bar's 31 billion, this bar's 16 billion. So we get the ability to sort, but we lose scaling. This matrix has the correct scaling. We've got 31 billion, 16 billion, approximately half, but we can't sort it to do this kind of stuff. Well, Zebra BI gives you the best of both worlds. You have proper scaling and one-click sort. So here I can sort on exports, or I can sort on imports, or if I turn it off, it will sort by grand total, the same as Power BI matrices. So it's really, really cool. And again, you could code this up with .NET, or you could approximate it, but it's never going to be as good, and it's going to take a lot of time. All that gets us quite close to the final design I used for some detail pages for the dashboard that I built. So this is very similar to what we saw before, but I've got some additional stuff at the top here. So we've got options to change granularity between annual and quarterly. If I click on quarterly, you'll see what happens. It's a little slow, sorry. I've got a lot of stuff open. So here we're looking at just the last 5 quarters versus annual, but that's kind of handy. We've got the ability to change between trade, and at the moment we're looking at both exports and imports mashed together. So, you know, I would have to put it onto exports just to show exports, or imports just to show exports. But if we want to see both exports and imports in one graph, hey, we can click on this thing and change it to a trade balance layout, which gives us that hills and valley effect we looked at earlier. And there's another button here that just changes the layout. Here I've got category on this main thing and country on the table on the right hand side, but we can change that just by clicking this button. Another thing I did is I put this ability to change from your individual panel view to showing the total view, so the total of all countries put together. And I did this because at the time Zebra BI didn't let you do this automatically. But they subsequently released this really cool bit of functionality here, a stack chart. It just lets you toggle between the small multiples and the stack chart with the total at the top. So I think that's really, really cool. The product certainly does not stand still. And the client also wanted an overview page where they could see quite a lot of stuff in one particular go. In fact, just before I do that, let me just go back one. What I'm going to show you is
those darn clients.
Yeah. Let me just change this around. Right at the start, I said some of the things the client might want to know is, well, what's been the impact of travel and COVID? So this just lets you do it off the bat. So I click travel here, and we can see that both imports and exports of travel took a dive during COVID. And we can see it took quite a massive dive. Travel was quite a big earner for us. You can also see stuff like, down here, this is an interesting one, vehicles, aircraft, and transport equipment. Oh, my screen's just died. Sorry, let me just try and wake it up. I don't know if you can see it.
We can see your screen, actually.
Great, let's come back again. In fact, I'll look at this one on the next one. Oh yeah, here we go. Vehicles, aircraft, and transport equipment. We can see something really, really weird going on with the US. This is exports at the top, imports at the top. So we imported a few Boeings from you guys, but we were starting to ramp down, and then COVID hit, so we stopped importing completely. And we've got this almost no exports of planes because we're not known for manufacturing planes. And then suddenly we had a massive increase in the amount of planes we export, which is kind of weird because, like I said, we don't really make them. And what that was is it was us taking some of those planes that we imported over here and sending them back to you for storage in the desert, wherever your plane storage is over there, because we knew we were going to be using them for any particular time. And they got marked as an export receipt. So you can really start to see from looking at the stuff, from doing these kind of cross-filtering, you can get an idea of what's going on with the country. But like I said, the customer wanted to see an overview page where they had quite a bit of stuff at once. This is an older one. I've actually redesigned it since then, and I just haven't had a chance to incorporate it into this presentation. But we've got annual trade balance at the left. We've got quarterly exports and imports. For some reason, I did them as 2 separate visuals. I've actually redone them as a small multiple because it's a lot more efficient, and they're scaled as a small multiple. but here they're still separate. And unlike the stats one, you don't have to switch between them. The switch is already done. We've got all the space here. Do we really want to use a field parameter and have a user toggle between annual and quarterly? Well, if we've got space, I mean, even though it's a cool hack, why wouldn't we just show it to them right off the bat? We've also break everything up by subcategories. So, I hover over this, and we get to see what makes up that trade, the top 5 categories plus others. Here we've got share of New Zealand exports, but this is all parameterized, so we can change this to imports. So we can see how the share of the top 3 countries has changed. And again, we can hover over this kind of thing. Oops, if it comes up, and we can see the top. It's not staying, is it? The top few countries and others. We can
Jeff,
see the
we got
breakdown.
some questions in the chat whenever you get a free moment.
Yeah, sure. We're coming to the end now, so
we're already at the end. No way. So,
but not quite. We're not quite there. So just hold fire for the questions, and we can come back.
Yep.
Client wanted a pie chart, so I put a pie chart in. Like I said, it's, they're not the devil's work. It just shows the last 12 months. I've reconfigured this at the moment with my work in progress, which I might bring up at the end, so that if you also click on 2021, it'll change this view here just to show 2021 and change this view here to show 2021. The other thing we did is, like I said, what I didn't like about the original dashboard is that the slicer was in alphabetical order, and who cares about Antarctica at the top? Whereas this one, using Power Query, I put it into descending order and created an index so I could do a sort by. So great, we actually get some information right off the bat so that we can see what are the major partners or categories that we care about. So we can see that China's number 1, Australia's number 2, US is number 3, so on and so forth. And I actually also built it right into the narrative. So I just parked the slicer right by the title. Everything's parameterized, so if I change to US, you'll see all the graphs change, annual trade balance with USA, quarterly exports to USA. And it kind of seems overkill because they've got United States at the top. But the reason I've done it on all the individual visuals is part of the brief was he wanted to be able to cut and paste any of these visuals directly into a report and for the people to know what it was. Well, it's USA. USA. Sorry. Also put a little slicer over here so we can change this integrated variance between quarter to date and year to date if we want. And also have a little control here that changes it between major changes, which is a slightly different view. So we can, if it comes up, what's going on? It's died. It did come up, and now I've changed it back. Actually a lot faster in the service, but I still have some optimization to do. Grand. So this is a slightly different view where we can actually see the variance. So we can see the absolute amount, the change, and the percent change. And this is all user configurable. So we're looking at exports since 2018, but hey, if we wanted to look at two-way trade since any other period, we can do it. So the client really wanted to be able to answer any question that would conceivably be put to him without having to call me up at my consulting rate. Like I said, I'm actually redeveloping this at the moment. But really, this is kind of the key point, is that dashboard design is the thing. And not many of us are taught how to do the thing. And we're all learning, me included. There's a heck of a lot that I don't know, and there's a heck of a lot in here that might not gel with other people for their aesthetic. But there are some really, really good resources. Some of them are free, and some of them are paid but worth every cent. In this presentation, you'll find links to the main books I care about and some free ones, and some other fantastic books down the bottom. And you'll also find links to two really good presentations that talk about the value of all this kind of stuff. I really like Andre from Zebra BI. He's visionary visualizer as far as I'm concerned. He's got a fantastic presentation called The 7 Worst Power BI Dashboard Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. If you're making Power BI dashboards and you have not seen this presentation, I think you should stop and watch it. He does use Zebra BI to answer, to show how he would change things, but you'll learn a heck of a lot about non-Zebra BI dashboards just by watching it. So it's worth its every cent. And this is a Kiwi guy up in Auckland. He's got a fantastic slide deck that I linked to here. I love this quote from him that says, you know, you'll all get dashboards that exist forever without anybody knowing why they're being maintained and who exactly is benefiting from them. So it's a cool presentation, highly worth checking out. I also just got a link here of a whole bunch of different resources that are broken down into different places. If you're interested in what got me to the place that I am, it's not a definitive list, it's just stuff that I found really helpful. And with that, I'm just going to quickly go to the NZ Council, US Council website so we can see how it looks on their actual site. Right, here we are, Power BI, make it full screen, oops. And so this is, again, this is the overview page, but they can jump into a details page. They can swap between trade balance, quarterly, you name it, they can do it. They can drill down to different categories. So here we're at a kind of a level 1 category, which is quite high up, where everything gets, like for instance, with animals, everything gets done into the group live animals and animal products, but we can break that down further if we want. Here we have that dairy produce and birds' eggs, that funny thing we saw before. So it's kind of a cool product. The interesting thing from my perspective about this product is there was a free product. It didn't cost them anything. It was that Stats New Zealand dashboard. But actually it did cost them something. It cost them a whole heap of time trying to get insight out of it. So despite a free product being available, they actually paid me quite well to build an additional product. In fact, I actually do this as a service. This is a dashboard as a service. So I actually rent this to them. I update it 4 times a year, and they pay me a fixed fee because I also make improvements to it over time. And so it just goes to show that a dashboard isn't good because you provide it. A dashboard is good because it answers somebody's questions. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that people have posted in the chat.
Awesome. Well, we've only got a couple, and I think this was just such a great walkthrough of all things visual. So thank you so much, Jeff. Before we get to questions, how about we give Jeff a round of applause? You can come off mute. You can clap with me. You can do it both virtually.
Woo! Hey, thanks.
Hey! Thank you, Mr. Jeff. Now for the fun part where we all get to interact and ask questions. So let's go back to Silke. She asked, are you changing bookmarks by using radio buttons? If so, how? And if you want to just give us a quick look into that bookmarks pane again, would be a joy.
Yeah, I am. One of my pet hates about Power BI is that it does not allow you to trigger bookmarks from a slicer. It's just appalling that it doesn't. So what I do, and this is this is kind of crazy. So you saw me changing these between these different states here. It looks like there's 6 things we could pick and match between, but there's actually 8. There's actually 2 times 2, which is 4, times 2, which is 8. So there's actually, down the bottom here, there's actually 8 different different pages, almost identical. So we've got annual trade by country, quarterly trade by country, annual trade balance by country, annual trade balance by category. So there's 8 different variations of this particular dashboard because it was just too much to do in one visual with all the different options that you navigate to by clicking these slices. But in front of these slices, I actually have bookmarks. So what happens is if I click on this bookmark, in fact, let me bring up the selection pane and see what it's called. We
always name them, right?
Always
you need to name them. Yes.
Exactly, and you'll see I've even grouped them here. So I've got a thing here that says display, and I can see that there is a bookmark, BM for bookmark, that leads to previous year, quarterly, country. There's only one bookmark there's not a bookmark over trade balance. That's because it's already selected. It would be redundant to have one there. So when I click on this, then the application effectively knows, oh, you want to go to the quarterly trade country view. If I open up this granularity one over here, this one over here, for instance, if I click on this bookmark here, here we see it's a bookmark. It says bookmark trade balance annually. So and I've even capitalized annually, so I know what these bookmarks. Actually, there was a reason, but I can't remember what it was. Never mind. Maybe it will become apparent if I make this wider. So what this is it's a bookmark, part different of a slicer. You click on the bookmark. That doesn't change the slicer behavior, but then the bookmark says, hey, someone just clicked on me. I need to change the slicer behavior and navigate to the particular page concerned. And it took a long time to do this. Originally, I tried a whole bunch of other things. I tried, Power BI has these kind of navigation slices where you would have a list of pages, you would click something from a drop down and click go. But we just found that too tedious. We found this was just the most easy way to navigate between 8 different states. So that's how I did that. Next question, Greg. Any more questions? Oh, you're on mute, bud.
Sorry. Yes, we've got more questions. Okay, next one. If I just find my spot, where was that? Okay. Could you talk about your design choice of having gray backgrounds in your visuals? And I know I'm a huge fan of using grayscaling, thanks to Mr. Brian Grant. So can you chat about that?
Yeah. I tried white originally with it just wasn't popping. Let me just go back to the actual dashboard page. Sorry, I have to think about this. Nice. Let me just put it here. In fact, oh yeah, no, I will do that. It just looked better, I thought. What I would like to do is parameterize it so you could just change it all with a theme. I just hadn't got around to it. You know, this is one of those things I've been developing over years, and the data model's a bit of a mess, and you know, there's bookmarks that I no longer use, and it's just hard to find the time to prioritize what I'm going to work on next. But I just found the grey backgrounds made it pop a little bit more. I tried the reverse. I tried a slight grey background or grey canvas and white visuals, and it just didn't seem to work as well.
And using the different grayscaling, right? It gives you a way to use color sparingly, right? Like, see how the color just pops so much, and that way you can really give a definition to color versus, you know, using colors just to make things pop, right?
Speaking of color, I'm not that happy with this particular one, in that I'm trying to be consistent. So I've got green for growth year on year. I've got orange for decline. Andre from Zebra BI hates my orange yellow here. He's always telling me to change it to the red he uses. But the reason I didn't use red is a fall in exports or is a fall in imports a bad thing? Well, it depends if you're an exporter or an importer, and whether you're a competitor or not of that particular thing. So I kind of thought green often means good, but it also means growth. The orange was just kind of like more of a warning, hey, something's happened here, it's gone down. But I didn't find it as negative as red. Here, I'm not happy with this color palette at all, and I'm actually changing it. Here I also wanted to show trade balance. So when exports exceed imports versus imports exceed exports. And obviously I couldn't use green and orange or yellow or whatever the heck it is, because that already means something. So I had to find 2 other colors. If I actually bring up the one I'm working on, you'll see I'm trying to tone it back, but there's some changes I need Zebra to do first. Let me just find it very quickly. It is in development. This one here. I'm also getting rid of those square boxes in the middle, those what are they called, card visuals. Zebra BI actually has, since I've since I created this dashboard, they actually released Zebra BI card visuals, and they're freaking awesome. But I actually realized I don't actually need them. All I need is a smart narrative. And again, smart narratives weren't done when I first did this visual. So this is my redesign in progress, where it's kind of toned down quite a bit. I'm using more of a kind of a grey thing here, or change it to services. Maybe we'll see the difference where it swaps over countries. There's an example. Great. I'm using lighter grey here. It's a lot more sparing here. I talked about the fact that originally I had a box for exports and a box for imports, but I just realized, well, that's just crazy. I should use one visual, and that way they also get scaled appropriately. And you can really see that when you click on something where there's asymmetric trade patterns, like transportation, for instance. Great, we can now see these relative to each other. Something I'm also doing, I've taken out those boxes and I haven't worked out yet how I'm going to move everything across, but I thought I'd take a leaf from that Stats New Zealand graph and use smart narratives here. This isn't the user view, so these things are supposed to be here, but you don't see them in the final product. But we automatically get, colored formatting. If it's a decline, it'll show in red. If I choose something else, see, I think the US is in growth mode. Great, we'll see that it's in black. I've got some more work to do here. One thing I'm kind of excited about at the moment is this little puppy here. So you'll remember from the other one, I showed year-on-year changes with seasonal changes with the quarterly trade. That's because trade is very seasonal. But I've made the ability here so we can actually do stuff like show that or not. So great, now we've got this kind of year-on-year with growth highlighted compared to the same period last year. I've also made it so that they can choose how many quarters they want to show here. So if you're actually showing year-on-year, if you think about it, you only really need 4 quarters, because you're comparing every point to the same period the previous year. And I quite like these kind of faking almost a user form here in Power BI. I wish I had native user forms. What we can do stuff like we can actually say, well, actually, let's go back 12 quarters and let's just turn off that. So we can do things like this. The other thing I have been working on, oops, let me just reset that for a second. So let's go back to, I don't know, just 5 quarters. Enter dismiss. The other thing I've been working on is in my original dashboard, you couldn't change this. This always showed the last 5 quarters. But I thought, well, why don't we make it dynamic? So if I click on 2020, it shows the 5 quarters to quarter 2 2020, because this is the latest data, or 2019 or 2018. It's not actually just a simple filtering trick here. What I'm actually doing is I'm actually serving up a default of, I want the default view to be the last 5, not everything, but the last 5. But we can change on that by clicking a particular year. And this also changes the visual on the right-hand side. So instead of just showing the last 12 months, now it shows 12 months to whatever time versus the same period the previous year. And if you click on this quarterly one here, it's going to change from saying annual trade to quarterly trade quarterly trade quarter 2 2022. So I'm trying to be a lot more dynamic with it. It allows you to do some pretty cool things, like you can actually select multiple years, which should then make the quarterly one show multiple years as well. But it's a work in progress. And it looks really simple, but it's actually been really complicated to work out how to do it.
So that leads me pretty much right into my next question from Pranam. How do you educate users to do all the craziness of the visuals, some of the sophistication that you bring into reports? I mean, this is something I commonly run into too. It's like, how sophisticated do I make my report based on my consumers? Do you do things like the little information buttons, or, what do you have any just best practices on like little breadcrumbs you may leave in a report to just make it that much easier to use?
No, but I should.
Just
I mean,
assume that they know everything, right?
yeah. I was lucky in this particular case that there was one user, and while this would go on their website, but it's designed in a way that it shows more information than the existing one did anyway, so that users don't actually have to click anything to get insight, but you can drill deeper if you know how to. And what I was pleasantly surprised with is how sophisticated my user was. And I think this is a key learning. I think users are more sophisticated than we think. I mean, these people are running companies. They're using Excel. They're not idiots, you know. And so I think that there's this incorrect narrative in datavis and in Power BI that you've got to have limited number of visuals on a page because partly for performance reasons, but partly because users can't handle the truth. Well, they can. They're smart people. You just got to design things in a way that they can understand it. And sure, we can supplement this with things like take a tour. So when I do this, when I finish building this dashboard, you see I've got a pop-up thing here that pops something up, but
like a tooltip. I think they call it tooltips, right? Yes.
Tooltip. Yeah. Well, I'm going to do something similar with, take a tour. So I'm going to have a take a tour button that's going to walk people through all these things very much in the same manner as that presentation walked you through my thinking. But it just takes so much time. I think that our main, as dashboard designers, our main enemy is time. We just don't have time to do all the stuff we could do or to learn all the stuff we could learn.
Well, I think this also leads into Kimberly's question, which, Kim, if you want to come off mute.
Sure.
I think the two things are very interrelated.
Yeah, so my question really hinges around, so my Power BI developer data visualization brain absolutely loves everything here. My business intelligence manager brain has some heartburn around the amount of maintenance, especially with you coming in as a consultant to build this for a company. How do you, so I guess it's a two-part question. How do you find that balance between really clever, beautiful solutioning and the maintenance it takes to have 8 pages with 8 bookmarks that look like radio buttons? And also, how do you document things like this in order to hand it off to a business for them to publish and maintain once you have completed your work?
I don't.
Okay, cool.
Next question. No, it's a really, really fair question. And this dashboard is kind of a crazy use case because I am the company. I rent it to one person, and a couple of other trade orgs are interested in it, of course, because they can change it to, like China, for instance. So the China Council may be interested, or so on and so forth. So I'm the only developer. I've got no one to hand it to. It still has technical risk. It is really complicated. I mean, you just untangling the data is incredibly complicated, and the data is all from CSV. The jobs. I'm not sure if it's going to show here, but just sometimes I'll come back to it and I'll go, what the hell? How does this thing work? Because even I haven't done a good enough job of documenting it. But there is crazy data jobs here. There's some crazy DAX tricks here. I think one of the ways I've done this, documented this stuff before is I've made almost presentations like this one where I put pop-ups to show this is how the thing works. But this is your nightmare. This is your worst nightmare come true because this stuff is really complicated. But at the same time, I don't know, it's a trade-off, right? Like, at least my customer can see what happened to travel through COVID, or what happened with the airplane trade. This one is much simpler, but it doesn't answer the questions the customer had.
How many users would you say that you have that you are having to walk through using this? Do you get a lot of questions from your end users, or is this just kind of out in the world?
So this is just one user. But
So one developer, one user. Go crazy. Make it as complicated as you want.
But he has a bunch of members. So this is on their website as a membership tool. But he actually also uses it to do a bunch of presentations. And so what's absolutely amazing, actually what's been incredible with Jordan is he's actually pushed some of this complexity. So you know, these bookmarks, for instance. Let me go to the actual existing one on their dashboard. He records videos. When I update this, he records videos whizzing through it. Like he can actually use this thing better than me. And he's a smart guy, but he's not a datavis guy. And I don't think he's any smarter than, I hope he's not watching, than anybody else. I mean, no, he's a really smart guy. He's a great guy. But it can be daunting at first. But when you get to it, you realize, oh yeah, there's a bunch of radio buttons. Oh yeah, I click this one and it changes it from, you know, trade to trade balance. It changes from annual to quarterly. I mean, there's a lot of complexity behind the scenes, but I've tried to abstract it away, but just by making it easy for him to do stuff. I don't think he knows how to do things like multi-select, but because I don't think I've told him, or if I've told him, he's probably forgot. But he doesn't care. He just, I wouldn't say he muddles through. He flies through this. It's quite interesting. Now, this sits in the website for other users to be able to see. Other users, if there even are any, I don't know. They probably look at it and they go, "Oh yeah, that tells me more than what I want to know. I don't want to see anything else." So they don't necessarily have to do anything else. But you know, it's they can, I guess, they can noodle, right? They can go, "Oh, what does major changes do?" And you click on that. And you know, I've got some stuff here that says, you know, click to see categories with major changes. So there is some, you know, some tooltips and stuff like that. It's by no means as user-friendly as it could be in terms of taking people on a tour. I think the best tour I've ever seen is, again, Andre Lapini from Zebra BI. Some of the stuff he's built in his take a tour buttons on his dashboards are phenomenal. I've failed here in not doing that, but partly because I'm always developing this thing. As soon as I would develop and take a tour, it would kind of be out of date. I do intend to do it for this new one because it's going to be much more complex. But again, the fact that you can click on, say, 2020 and know that this view changes, you don't necessarily have to know that. You don't necessarily have to click on anything to get value out of it.
I'd love to.
Good question.
Do you have a link to any of those examples where he's done with the take a tour? I would love to see that.
Oh yeah, I'll have to find one and I'll add it to this presentation.
Great, thank you.
But really, that entire presentation, I mean, this entire presentation, these bookmarks, this is a tour, right? I mean, this is the ultimate take a tour. The fact that you can use Power BI to do this, you know, I could actually build something like this. I mean, it wouldn't be all the visualization stuff, but it would be like take a tour. It would just pop them to this, and it would discuss what these things do. You know, it doesn't have to be popping up tooltips on that particular page. We've got the power. We can do it. One of the things I've really enjoyed recently, though, I think one of my key learnings is in redeveloping this is the importance, the value of smart narratives. Like having this text here, I think this is you know, this is killer. People will look at this and they'll go, "Oh goodness me, I'm a little bit scared," but they'll look at some words here and they'll go, "Ah, wow, there's some words here. I'll read the words," and they'll get through this and it'll say, in the last 12 months to June 2020, New Zealand exported $4.17 billion. And then they might look for 4.17 and they go, "Oh, this is 4.2. Ah, this is exports." So I think having some plain English stuff there for non-data people is much, much better than my current design of just having these 4 boxes here. And I still want to do better here. I'm still making it better.
So next question, and I'm kind of scared to see this, but can we see your data model? Show us your data model, Jeff.
No, this I'll show you the one on the I'll show you the one on this one. This one's this one that's being redeveloped is really messy.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because I'm doing the wrong things, but because the data's crazy. We've got ragged hierarchies here. So what a ragged hierarchy is normally in Power BI, your data is all hierarchical, right? You've got I don't know, level 1. You've got cities. You've got countries, and then you've got cities, and then you've got I don't know, countries, provinces, cities. This data isn't like that. Sometimes some categories are only at the country level. Some categories go down to province, and some go down to cities within those provinces. And so to get that, and this is something that this new one does that this last one didn't. I've got this ability to draw through here. In fact, let's look at this. Let's look at travel, for example. Here I've got travel. If I expand this, we can see we've got personal travel, which is broken down into, let me just, personal travel and business travel. And you can see that personal travel can be expanded further. And this is something I alluded to earlier. It can be broken down into other personal travel and education-related travel, whereas business travel isn't. And even worse, these numbers don't add up because Stats New Zealand suppress data at different levels to respect confidentiality of some businesses. So if you were to take the figures from some subcategories and add them up, they wouldn't equal the next level up. And if you were to take all the data at even just like level 1 of all the different countries and add them up, it wouldn't match the grand total country total. So I have to do this almost what is it called? Aggregations type thing, but all in DAX and hierarchies and crazy stuff to make sure the right number gets served up. And long story short, this is how this looks. This is crazy. We've got 3 calendar tables, and I can talk to that if you want. We've got our fact table in the middle here, and then we've got this category hierarchy with this. This looks bad. There's 3 relationships, multi-directional to a simple category code that then goes to the country code. And this is all to accommodate this ragged hierarchy with things that don't add up. There's a bunch of settings tables over on the side here that don't do anything. There's some calculation groups that do some really, really cool things. So it's kind of somewhat simple, except for these 3 calendar tables. And the reason I have 3 is, again, it's for these pop-up tooltips. This one, this pop-up tooltip needs a separate calendar table so I can pop up the subcategories without it filtering down to 1 point. And this one was a special case where I needed a 3rd calendar table to do the same kind of thing. Now, you might look at this and go, that's nuts. The SQL BI guys would never recommend you do that. But I'm heartened to say that just the other day they published an article saying these are some cases where you might want 2 calendar tables, and I was like, yes, I'm accidentally right. But so the data model is not overly bad with this, but
I've never seen multiple calendar tables.
Yeah. Well, it is allowed. It's allowable.
It's allowable. Everything's allowable.
I'm going to show you, actually, there was an article just before, a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago, SQL BI. Where's their blog? Articles and blog, there we go.
Favorite
I can't
SQL
find it now.
BIers.
You don't believe me, but it is in there somewhere.
This is the source of truth. If you're going to do something socially acceptable in the Power BI world, it's got to be blogged by Marco or Alberto.
I've got to put my money where my mouth is. Anyway,
Control F. Control F.
I did a tweet about it the other day. It's probably I actually use Twitter to find things.
Okay.
So it was.
Again, another plug. You should follow Jeff.
Calendar. Did I spell that right? Maybe not.
Calendar. I can't even spell. I think
I can't even spell Insights Machine.
yeah, you did spell calendar right.
Machine.
You can have, yes, having a secondary. Yeah, there you go.
In fact, that's Andre saying you needed one, and he does it in his webinar. But these SQL BI guys did it. I think I did it under a reply. Where is it? I just can't remember which one of them it was. So I can't find it, but it is allowable, and it's actually in Andre's webinar. Not that he's SQL BI, but anyways, it is doable. Probably a good use case for composite models.
Yes, maybe we need to use a meetup on models and wacky models. Not the commonly used. All right, Jeff, I think we got one more, then I can probably let you get on with your day. How about that?
Excellent, thank you.
So Pranam was asking, how do you get user requirements? You know, very specifically for data visualization. I'm sure you've got you've heard, you know, from the wackiest to the dullest, and you know, how do you get through that? You know, do you have a process? Do you have, you know, certain questions you ask pretty much like consistently?
You know, I'm terrible at all this kind of stuff. I don't come from a mature BI background.
You don't seem like a process guy to me.
I'm not. I just go.
You're like a Picasso.
Yeah, I just go. How do I explain this data to me? So almost every engagement I have, I get some data, and you know, I'll know more or less what they want to hire me. But I'll go, man, I need to understand this data so that I can then work out how to dashboard it. And just the process of understanding it turns things up. One of the things I forgot to mention is I actually have a really good another good sample file that talks about some of this stuff, which I'll just chuck in the chat. There we go. This is a sample file using New Zealand baby name trends. But my whole process of this is just walking through going, how does this look? Sorry, there's some notes and stuff, but how does this look in different, if I look at this in different ways? And so this is almost like my process, is I make up a lot of different graphs. There's an explanation here about how things are working, but I make up a lot of different graphs so I can understand different aspects of the data. And then I go, how am I going to bring these into one view? What's the most important thing? So I'm not a big wireframer. In fact, I'm embarrassed to say that my client actually did more of the wireframe for this than me. Because originally I just had...
Make them wireframe, genius.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Originally
did you
I
have
just
them
had
wireframe in something specific? Like, did you have them wireframe in like PowerPoint or?
No, he just
like
drew on a
paper,
back of a napkin, and I didn't ask him to do anything. Originally I served him up something very similar to this, and he went, "Hey, this is really, really handy. I can see how I can drill down and see things, you know. But what I really want is..." And then he drew some of this. He drew. In fact, one of the things he drew was this kind of major changes component. He says, "I want to be able to look at, you know, the major changes in a particular time, and it's kind of grown from there." So he didn't sit down and draw this. I didn't sit down and draw this. If we had sat down to draw what we wanted and then had it executed it, I'm pretty sure it would be crap. But it would have been delivered a lot faster and possibly cheaper. But, you know, I just try and explain the data to myself and find a way to give people an ability to navigate through it without them having to click too many buttons.
I think that's a really good suggestion. Like, to be able to navigate, to be able to explore without clicking too much.
Yeah, I think clicking is losing. Slicing is losing. If you've got a dashboard and you're constantly slicing on region, why is that? Well, it's because your dashboard design doesn't leverage small multiples. If region is, if you want to compare, for instance, if you're comparing things, break it out into small multiples, or even just two charts, or even just the same charts with edit interactions disabled, like I've got down the bottom here. Two charts, So he can, I forgot to show this, but he wanted to be able to compare to China, but you compare any country with any country. This is United States versus Japan. This is the same data model. It's just I've got edit interactions disabled between these two things somehow. I can't remember how I did it.
Well, I mean, to your point, what we've seen the same is too much self-service. Too much clicking around. You kind of lose your user, right? Know your user and what they're what they're typically going to click around about, or drill into, and really tailor it to that. Too much self-service. You kind of lose people. Although that's what Microsoft, and we're always talking about self-service analytics, right? But really try and dumb it down and tailor it to the business user.
That comes back to this slide that I stuck in, not this one. Sorry, just in the last thing, I can't underscore the importance of this enough. Is this, I really, that's why I put these things in here. I thought about taking them out, but I really love what Moritz is saying here about datavis in the industry, about us either doing number decoration or the data explorer. Now, whoever built this dashboard didn't mean to build something like this, but you can just see that it's probably going to take someone an awful lot of time to see if there's anything interesting going on in business that's not going on in educational. It's like we need to get better at working out how we build these things to investigate stuff. And you cannot do investigations with a data explorer. My client, like I said, he was printing out, he was taking screenshots of this and then printing them out and putting it on his kitchen table just so he could try and work out, well, what might be in ICT and how might it be changing to compared to China. And of course, things are all different scales and stuff like that. All he needed was small multiples. So for better or for worse, that's what we ended up with.
Love small multiples.
Glad to
All right,
hear
well,
it.
Jeff, I promised you that was the last question, and it actually was. Any closing remarks, closing words to your friends here in Portland and beyond?
No, thanks very much for having me.
Jeff, we so thoroughly enjoyed this, and thank you so much for being a regular here at the Portland Power BI User Group.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
One more round. Let's just give another round of applause for Jeff. Thanks again, Jeff, and hopefully see you next year.